Whew, I'm almost out of breath. I just got off of a redacted podcast. That was a lot of fun talking about a really horrible event down in Australia, but very interesting to listen to the dialogue. Okay, where we left off where Mitchner and his former son-in-law Corson was doing all of these deals together with Mitchner's Allied Bank after he divorced Mitchner's daughter under the auspices of supposedly beating her and not being a good husband at all. And so most people would wonder, why is he still doing business with Corson? Well, as it turns out, they're all involved in the CIA and Mafia collectively. So they had a different family relationship than just the immediate family relationship. Okay, so where we left off, Mitchner's daughter had divorced Corson, and he went to work for a Houston real estate appraiser and developer, Paul Lewis, in 1978. Paul Robert Corson had built and sold 100 shopping centers in Houston and joined the Lewis brothers in the ownership and management of a development company called Reatta, Reatta. Oh, I see Bridget there. Let me bring her up real quick. Okay. At the same time, Corson had joined the company. Lewis had started borrowing money from Mitchner's Allied Bank for shopping centers and daycare centers. His first loan from Allied Bank was $300,000. In June of that year, he borrowed another almost $150,000, and then eventually the next month, almost $1 million. The first public document that showed Lewis and Corson in a land deal together was dated in October of 1977, when Corson's mother, BJ, served as a middleman in flipping a land deal. About half an acre of land in Harris County had been deeded to BJ as a trustee, who was also the person that did that was called the Breakfast Club Limited. 2 weeks later, BJ deeded the land over to Paul Lewis, her son's partner, as trustee. Both deeds were filed the same day. One of the general partners of the Breakfast Club was Johnson Loggins Company. It was owned by Glenn Loggins, a business partner and former employee of Mitchner. Very small family deal. 2 months later, another flip involving BJ and Johnson Loggins took place. This, again, is how you money launder. Corson's closest business associate in his company with his mother was Bill Chester. He functioned as Corson's bodyguard. Chester had been working for Mitchner at Allied Bank before being transferred over to Corson, maybe as his handler. One of Corson's former chauffeurs and bodyguard in 1986, Tom Sturdivant, told a private investigator that Corson and Mitchner were very close to each other. Sturdivant said that Mitchner backed Corson's financial deals throughout the mid-1980s. Corson had claimed in a letter that Sturdivant was not credible because he had been fired for stealing. But Sturdivant made his comments during an investigation of Corson's associate by Houston attorney Tom Alexander, who is Mitchner's attorney and close friend. Alexander allowed the author, while he was working for the Houston Post, to examine his files on Corson, which included an interview with Sturdivant. Alexander, who would give his right arm to protect Mitchner, did nothing to keep Sturdivant's interview secret, and in fact turned over his files containing the interview to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston. This was more than a year before the author began asking questions about Corson's connections to Michener and the CIA. When told about this, Michener replied, "Well, it might have been some stuff that Paula got involved with, where she signed a note and I bailed her out. But I never done business with him or had any business dealings with him," which Michener says about everybody until he's reminded that he actually signed a document. And then he goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, but that was a long time ago." When the author told Michener that he was not talking about that, but about all the Allied loans, including those with Paul Lewis, Michener replied, "Well," and then stuttered a few times, "I know that Paul and David Lewis were customers of the bank and that Robert and Paul were kind of buddies. Yeah, I did know that. And I think that Paul got the same treatment that I did from Robert. He lost his money." There were other intersections between Michener's circle and Corson after the divorce. There was a loan from Corson's savings and loan to Joe McDermott, a friend and business partner and former employee of Michener's, who was given his start in a Houston development community by Michener himself. In 1986, Corson's savings and loan lent him several $1,000,000 secured by Splashtown USA, a water entertainment amusement park in Houston. Michener at first denied the association with this transaction. When he was told that McDermott had dealt with Corson, he said he called McDermott up to question him about it. And then there was Catberg's. There was always strange characters hanging around at Catberg's, which was an upscale honky-tonk in Houston. First, there was John Hall from Costa Rica. He's the guy that Gary Webb talked about working for the CIA that had the ranch near the border with Nicaragua that they were doing terrorist training camps on. Hall would occasionally come to Houston to meet with the Contra supporters, including Oliver North and Rob Owen, Oliver North's right-hand man that was hid in the State Department. In 1990, Hall was charged with drug trafficking by the Costa Rica government and then indicted for murder there in a bombing in which 7 people were killed in the attempted assassination of Edwin Pastora, the Contra leader who wouldn't deal with the CIA and their drug money. Hall jumped bond in Costa Rica and returned to his native Indiana. There was also John Riddle, a Houston lawyer and developer whose companies were borrowed more than $300 million from several of the failed Texas savings and loans like Vernon, Western, and Continental. There was Ken Quayles, a pilot who worked for the CIA proprietary airline. In 1979, Qualls, not Quail, Qualls, Qualls, was a pilot for American Continental Corporation, which was controlled by Charles Keating, who would later go down in history in his attempt as head of the Lincoln Savings and Loan to buy some U.S. senators. It was also Qualls who allegedly flew a BAC 111 to Paris in October 1980, carrying the Reagan-Bush team to negotiate the October surprise. The only time Catberg's appears in a story in the Houston Post was in a gossip column in 1987, when it was the site of a birthday party for a famous Houston restaurant owner, Tillman Fertitta. Fertitta, who said he knew Corson, is a member of the Galveston family that is related to the old Macchio family, which is a mafia family that ran the rackets and gambling in Galveston since the 1930s. Although Macchios were under the authority of the New Orleans Costa Nostra patriarch Sam, Sam was a mafia figure of some importance. He played a key role getting mobster Mo Dalit a license from the Nevada Tax Commission for his Desert Inn hotel in Las Vegas, in his hotel and casino in Las Vegas. Ferretadas also controlled a hotel and casino in Las Vegas that advertised package vacation deals with their Key Largo hotel in Galveston. In the book War of the Godfathers, former FBI agent William Romer Jr. described how the Chicago Mafia was trying to kill Mo Dalitz in Las Vegas because he had defected to the New York Bonanno family. I guess he just changed mob families. The acting Chicago Mafia boss rented a house in West Las Vegas, a couple streets off of I-15, not too far from the Palace Station, which is where Frank Fertitta Hotel and Casino was. He had friends in Chicago too. He had been an associate of Carl Thomas at the Tropicana when it was being skimmed for the Kansas City and Chicago Mafia families. Frank Fertitta is Tillman Fertitta's first cousin, once removed. Tillman is the head of the company in Houston that owns several noted restaurants like Landry's and Willie G's. When asked about the statements in Romer's book, Tillman said Carl Thomas was Frank's partner. He thought he was going to be hot shit and show the mob in Kansas City how to skim money. Carl Thomas was barred from Vegas. He can't even come into the city. That was when it was the Palace Station, when Palace Station was the Bingo Palace. It opened up as a small five and dime slot machine joint. It just grew and grew. But since its success and size, Frank's been in it by himself for the last 10 years. Carl was just in it from the beginning and got bought out as soon as he got in trouble. Fertitta said that Sam Macchio and his great uncle, that Sam Macchio was his great uncle, sorry, and that he had mafia ties. But then he says, what is a mafia? I've never even seen the word mafia used. That's the first I've ever heard the word mafia. We were in a gambling business. He also denied that the Macchio family was under the New Orleans Mafia. However, Aaron Cohn, the late head of the New Orleans Metropolitan Crime Commission, said there were close ties between the two, as far back as 1937, when Sam Macchios was indicted in a massive narcotics investigation that had been led by a famed special customs agent, Walter Craig. He was indicted in along with a Houston restaurant owner, Vincent Vallone, and another guy, Biagio Angelica. They were all in the mafia. Vincent Vallone, the grandfather of the noted Houston restaurateur Tony Vallone, that sounds like Tony Baloney, was shotgunned to death in a mob hit outside of his Houston restaurant in 1949. These allegations that Carlos Marcello had ordered the hit. The evidence was presented before a congressional crime committee that Marcello had spoken to Vallone on the phone before the hit. Marcello's phone records also showed the mafia boss had spoken to Houston oil man Lenore Josie just before the hit. Attending the birthday party for Tillman Fertitta at Catberg's was Archie Bennett, at the time a commissioner at the Port Authority in Houston. He was also head of the Mariner Hotel Corporation. Shortly thereafter, Southmark, which is that land development company in Dallas that has mafia ties, bought the Mariner. Bennett moved to Dallas to work for Southmark, and then he filed bankruptcy. Bennett's bankruptcy filings shows millions of dollars of debt to different savings and loans, all that failed. M Bank foreclosed on 2,000 shares of stock Bennett owned in National Bank of Texas, a failed Houston bank whose directors included Petita. Also listed in Bennett's bankruptcy papers is $500,000 unsecured loan from his friend Walter Mitchner. Again, that's how they paid each other. At the front of the Catbergs, inside near the bar, was a chair that was called the Catberg seat. Not only was it a symbol for the restaurant, it stood for something more significant. It was a rare public expression of a relationship between the Catberg's owner, Robert Corson, and Walter Mitchner. Catberg's was named by Corson for the expression sitting in the catbird seat, a favorite Mitchner adage. In fact, Mitchner's best friend, Keith Jackson, told the reporter in 1987 that sitting in the catbird seat is Mitchner's favorite expression. The name of the club in his Carousel Motel was called Brass Ring Club. Mitchner said it was bullshit and just a rumor that Catberg's was some secret symbol of a relationship between him and Corson. As for Catberg's, after opening with great fanfare, it went broke and closed its door within a year. The $40,000 borrowed to fix it up, a loan from Westside National Bank, where Corson and his mother owned the largest block of stock, was never paid back. When Corson bought Clayburgh County Savings and Loan in '86, he borrowed $6 million from M Bank Houston for the purchase. After a year, his savings and loan was insolvent, and he couldn't make payments on the M Bank loan. M Bank went ahead and renewed the loan because there was a participation from Mitchner's Allied Bank. So you can't pay your loan, it doesn't matter. Your former father-in-law helped you out. After the refinancing, which included a $2 million payout to the guy who can't pay his loan, Corson's mother and partner, BJ, was heard to remark that Papa Mitchner came through for them. When told this, Mitchner said, "I never had anything to do with her, ever. I don't know why she would say something like that." Mitchner called BJ Garman the sorriest piece of humanity he ever knew. He then goes on to say he has no idea where Corson got that money, except for it came from his bank. Okay, the story of Harris County's Judge John Lindsay is a classic tale of corrupt politicians. They called Lindsay the county judge when in fact he wasn't a judge at all. He was head of what's called the Harris County Commissioner's Court. He was basically like the chair of the county commission, not an actual judge. They just called it a court so they could call the guy in charge of it a judge to give him some authority, which he didn't have. The position was called the county judge because he would make the decisions on things like mental competency and liquor license. So he's the king corrupt politician in Houston. Lindsay is the most powerful politician in the entire area of Houston, not just because of his elected position, but because of his influence and position in the Republican Party. He was very good friends with George Bush. Lindsay headed Bush's presidential campaign in Harris County in 1988. And one of his first and closest aides was Chase Utemeyer, who went on to work in the Reagan-Bush administration and then became the coveted White House director of personnel when Bush was elected. And we all know what that is because Dan Scavino is currently serving in that position. Among the government services in Harris County Commission Court is responsible for is that it bestows power on its members for flood control, which is very important in land development on a coastal city, medical care for the poor, roads, parks, criminal justice system, all the things that you would want to have control over if you're going to embezzle money and be in control. And so keep in mind throughout this whole book, they're all in real estate development. That's a way they're laundering money. So this guy's got to be in their pocket because he's the one that approves the flood plain approvals and the road construction. So they can't do anything without this guy. Back in the early 70s, a small civil engineer named John Lindsay had a small construction company that built things like swimming pools. Lindsay came to Houston from New Mexico. He had grown up in Santa Fe. He was almost begging to get construction contracts in the city of Houston when he realized that being a politician was probably a better way to go. So he ran as a Democrat for a state representative and lost. But politics was in his blood then. So he did what every Democrat does when they can't win on the Democrat ticket. He changed to be a Republican and ran against the county judge, Bill Ellison, who was a liberal Democrat, straight talker, and tough. Lindsay would never have had a chance against Elliott, but something very rare happened in the 1974 election. Both Houston newspapers decided to take after Elliott, conducting investigations, writing exposés, and Lindsay won in an upset. Now, keep in mind, we've already covered who owns these newspapers, and they're all related to Michener in some form or fashion. So it's not a mystery how Lindsay, who's dying to be a politician, gets supported by the Mafia, CIA, and Michener and George Bush, and then he becomes the guy in charge that's going to help them money launder. So, one time there was a vote before the commissioner's court on a proposed toll road near the downtown Houston area. This road was going to be by some of Michener's land, and he was strongly supporting it. However, the word didn't get to Eccles, one of the other guys, or if it did, it didn't sink in. After the commissioner, in whose precinct the road would run, said he opposed it, Eccles voted against it, saying that he would follow the practice of the commissioner's court and acquiesce to the wishes of the appropriate commissioner. When Michener found out what was happening, he called up Eccles and blistered him. When the next vote came, Eccles definitely was in favor of it. Michener later acknowledged calling him about the vote, but he said, "No, I didn't chew him out. I didn't think I chewed anybody out." Eccles had been indicted 5 times before he had finally ran out of office after being convicted of accepting illegal gifts, equivalent to Al Capone's conviction in income tax evasion. He later died of a heart attack. Compared to Eccles, Lindsay seemed like Abraham Lincoln. Open, frank, accessible, Lindsay got good press coverage all the time. One of his first moves after getting elected was to initiate a program to purchase vacant land along Cypress Creek to keep the floodplain land from being developed. Lindsay also got better press than the city politicians, primarily because he was so much more accessible. Mayor Kathy Whitmire didn't get very good press at all. Something started happening to Lindsay around the time he was reelected for his 3rd term in 1982. Perhaps it was an inevitable outcome of power corrupts. Perhaps he started believing all of the fawning yes men around him. And he was a skirt chaser, even though he was married to an attorney, Tony Lindsay. After law school, Tony got a job at the Houston City Attorney's Office, and then, with only a few years' experience, she was appointed a state district judge, a real one, by Governor Bill Clements. More can be learned about politics in America by comparing Lindsay's list of campaign contributions in 1974 to his current list, and by comparing his 1980 financial statement to his 85 statement. There are a few big names or big contributions in 74, mostly just $50 and $100 from farmers and small businessmen. The Republican Party was the biggest donor to Lindsay. 7 days before the 74 election, Lindsay had only raised $29,000. Lindsay's current contribution list, on the contrary, is dominated by big Houston law firms, banks, construction companies, architects, engineers, and developers. In 1980, Lindsay listed a total asset of about $500,000 on his financial statement, but some 367 of this was his house and the 54 acres it sat on. The only stocks, bonds, and security he owned was Leave Alamo Bank, valued at $7,000, and $18,000 in U.S. Treasury bills. And this was after he had been in office for 5 years. But by 1985, he had stock ownership in 12 companies, including Harris County Bank and West Houston National Bank. He also had bonds in 3 public utilities, as well as CDs at Harris County Bank, valued between $50,000 and $100,000. He was also a partner in 70 acres north of Harris County, where a proposed apartment complex was going to be built. His total investments outside of his house was somewhere close to $500,000. That didn't include the value of the stock that he owned in the 12 companies, which would have added probably another 100,000. In 1985, Lindsay showed he borrowed funds to be somewhere between 30 and 150. This compares to his 23,000 in 80. So, he definitely was making money. At the same time, Lindsay was supporting a wife and 3 kids, all of whom he was putting through college, to include his wife. She wasn't a lawyer yet. In 1984, Lindsay got his first bad press when he admitted that he hired friends and campaign contributors to work for the county. Lucrative county contracts for architects and engineers, or professional services, were not based on the best or lowest bid. They were just Lindsay's friends. Shortly after saying that, Lindsay appeared before the Harris County Hospital District, which runs the tax-supported charity hospitals, to defend a district decision to build a new hospital in the middle of a federally designated 100-year floodplain. Although the building in the floodplain flew in the face of his philosophy, it had all the right backers. The factors that apparently outweighed his floodplain position, not to mention the endangerment of other people in the local area, were the land in the floodplain was owned by Dallas businessman H.R. Bum Bright, a rich, powerful Republican and owner of the Dallas Cowboys. The hospital district paid Bright almost $4 million for the land, which was about $2 million more than it was actually worth. The architects picked to design the new hospital were friends of Lindsay's. Bernard Johnson Inc. and 3D International were chosen with a fee of almost $3 million, and on and on. Asked if he influenced the hospital district in its selection of architects, he said, "I attempted to." In addition to the hospital being in the floodplain, the county was also building a new hospital in the Texas Medical Center. One of the architects chosen there, at one time the largest stockholder of that architect firm, CRS, was Gaith Pharaoh, a Saudi Arabian who had got caught in a negative publicity in 91 because of his being a money guy behind BCCI, the CIA front bank. That's interesting. When Lindsay appeared before the hospital district, which is appointed by the commissioner's court, he threatened the members with ouster if they didn't get the building program started. Critics of the new building said that the district would spend more money on services, not buildings, particularly when there were 6,000 empty beds in private hospitals already. In 1977, 1 year after Bernard Johnson's officers started making contributions to Lindsay, the company was awarded, at Lindsay's urging, a $4 million contract to design the county's new jail. In addition, in 1983, 3D International won, upon Lindsay's recommendation, a contract to design a new psychiatric hospital. So he's just wheeling and dealing through all of this. I'm going to kind of skip some of this because all of it goes to this type of heavy hitting. Down to the part where it talks about the property that Lindsay and his partners bought had a hit. So, in addition to him using his political sway with all of the city contracts, he's willing and dealing with these same people in his personal life as well. One of the properties that him and his partners bought had an interesting history. In June of 1982, it was sold by an affiliate of American General Corporation to Robert Corson's stepfather, William Garman. That's who BJ married, his mom, who was acting as a trustee for unknown beneficiaries, presumably Corson and his mother. American General is a giant insurance company in Houston that was controlled for years by Gus Wortham, one of the original members of the Lamar Hotel suite. That included Walter Mitchner. Among other dealings together, American General and Mitchner's company were partners in a large residential development called Cinco Ranch. 4 days after the first sale, Garman flipped the property to a man named Manzoor Adib Harani, acting as a trustee for an unknown beneficiary. It appeared that there were a gain of almost $500,000 for Garman. Harani signed a promissory note to Garman for $1 million, while Garman had signed a note to American General for $600,000. The difference between the two notes is only a guess as to the profit that Garman made in 4 days for the deal. It is not known what amount, if any, were the cash down payments that was outside of that deal. Harani also said that he bought the property from Corson's stepdad, Garman, that he dealt exclusively with American General and did not know that Garman was involved. Harani was a wealthy investor from Lebanon who keeps a very low profile while he's in Houston. He married a Mormon woman from Utah and joined the Mormon church. Harani is close to Orrin Hatch, again. Reportedly, also very close with Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms was instrumental in Iran-Contra. However, documents turned up in the BCCI, CIA front bank, investigation showed that Orrin Hatch had wrote a July 31st, 1986 letter to the Office of the Director of Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation, leaning on them not to pursue legal action against Harani regarding his deals with his old friend Mainland Savings. Hatch also apparently tried to arrange a loan from BCCI to Harani, and at one point wanted to make Harani the trustee of his blind trust. That's weird. A loan from BCCI. So Orrin Hatch is negotiating loans from the CIA to Harani. because BCCI is the CIA. And he thought so much about the guy that he wanted to make him the trustee of his blind trust. What was in his blind trust? A former employee of Harani said that he is in constant communication with the former Houston mayor, Louis Welch, who served as a go between for Harani and downtown business establishments like Michener. Harani's former employee also said that Harani would brag about his intelligence connections. I guess because he's dealing with BCCI. A former high ranking officer at Lamar Savings in Austin said Harani did business, where Harani did business, said that Harani claimed to have ties to Mossad as well. Harani, when asked, said he didn't have any intelligence ties, of course. Harani's Houston office was located in a building where the DGI offices of Corson's associate Mike Atkinson were located. One of Harani's companies was called DI Group, but Harani denied having any connections to Atkinson or any of the arms deals in which he was involved in. Sure, in Lebanon. In May 1983, about a year after he purchased his residential development property, Harani divided it into two and deeded both tracts in a partnership that included Harani's company. In October, this partnership carved up one of the 1.5 acre tracts into halves again and sold it to Robert Corson. Corson borrowed $350,000 from Allied Champions Bank, which is Michener's bank, to buy the land, and then built a strip mall on it. Harani said he only met Corson 1 or 2 times. He said he couldn't believe that Corson worked for the CIA. He looks like a country bumpkin. When the Houston Post story about this land deal was published in 1990, Harani called the reporter and threatened to file a $10 million libel suit. He said his attorney, Bob Brill of Brill and Brooks, was preparing the suit. When he said that Brill was also an attorney for Corson, Harani denied knowing that. After he had asked questions about his connections to the CIA, Atkinson's gun deals in the Middle East, Hatch, Helms, Welch, and loans to mainland savings, Harani said he was going to forget all about the lawsuit because the reporter had his shit together. Between March 1987 and 88, Brill and Brooks attorneys, along with business associates of Harani, including Louis Welch, contributed more than $17,000 to Senator Warren Hatch's campaign fund. More than 18 months later, when Harani had been drawn into the BCCI scandal, NBC News reporter Mark Hosenball reported that in the New Republic that Harani told him he and BCCI shareholder named Mohammed Hammond over several years worked with their mutual friend Senator Warren Hatch on various private schemes to free U.S. hostages in Lebanon. Meanwhile, less than a month after Corson bought his land from Harani, a Harani partnership sold the adjacent tract of land to Lindsay's partnership. The judge. There were denials all around, of course. Harani denied knowing that Lindsay was part of the partnership, and Lindsay denied knowing that Corson owned the tract next door. The first direct public connection between Corson and Lindsay appeared in 85, when Corson contributed $100 to Lindsay's campaign fund. Corson's mother also contributed. Lindsay wrote a general letter of recommendation for Corson on his official stationery. It said, "To whom it may concern, Robert Corson is a person well known to me to be of high character, and I have personally acquainted with him for many years, and know he enjoys the excellent reputation as a good family man and businessman, and a native Houstonian, and takes an active interest in his community. Mr. Corson has my unreserved recommendation as a person who will be diligent in the endeavor he pursues. Thank you." Okay, so he's a great family man, and in his divorce paperwork, was accused of beating his wife. Corson then used this letter of recommendation in his effort to buy Cleggburg County Savings Association in Kingsville and to get state and federal regulatory commissions to approve it. In May 1985, letter to Nelson Sharp, the chairman of Cleggburg County Savings, Corson stated that he was enclosing recommendation from banks and other companies that he had dealt with. One of the 7 letters was Lindsay's. In July of 1985, Corson signed a stock purchase agreement with the shareholders of Cleggburg County Savings to buy all of the outstanding stock for $5.5 million. Then in September, he filed for a change of control application for the savings and loan with the Texas regulators and the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. On December 23rd, the feds gave their approval for the purchase. The approval from the Texas Savings and Loan Commission was received one day after Corson made a $10,000 contribution to Lindsay's reelection campaign. This was the largest single campaign donation to Lindsay that he had ever received. And by this point, he had been in politics for a really long time. The only other campaign contribution Corson made in '86 was for $500 to a congressman in Texas, $2,000 to Jack Kemp in New York, $8,000 to the governor in Texas, Bill Clemens, $500 to a Louisiana congressman who was a close associate of the crook governor, Edwin Edwards. Lindsay said he doesn't remember Corson's $10,000 donation. He acknowledged that it was a rather large contribution. In September 1986, about 2 months before the county judge election, Houston hosted a party at his house for Lindsay. Lindsay's campaign records show a $600 contribution from Corson for the party, but Corson's own financial records say that he spent $3,200 on the party, including $1,500 paid to his wife, Randy Corson, for food, limousine services, liquor, valet service, and a photographer. It would have been a violation of Texas election law if Lindsay knew that he had spent that amount of money. Lindsay claimed the receipts that Corson provided showed the party cost $600. It was not a big reception, he said. In June of '86, after $200 million Florida land deal with St. Joe Paper Company was closed, that's the DuPont deal that we're going to get into details in a later chapter, Corson chartered a business jet and took Lindsay to Las Vegas to see a boxing match, charging this to his savings and loan expense account. When asked if he had ever gone with Corson out of town, Lindsay said, quote, he was on one time that he went on, I forgot who the host was, some title company, probably doing business with him at one time. I don't remember, unquote. Asked if he ever went to Las Vegas, he said, I don't think I've been to Vegas with him. They all have really bad memories. When Lindsay was told that Corson charged his savings and loan for taking him to Vegas to see fights, Lindsay just replied, well, I went to see a boxing match out there. I don't think it was with Corson, though. Lindsay conceded that he went on hunting trips to Mexico with Corson, though. Maybe they went duck hunting around there a time or two, he said. When the reporter first questioned him about his relationship with Corson, Lindsay denied that he even knew him very well. He's just gallivanting on hunting trips and Vegas trips. Asked if he remembered writing the letter of recommendation for Corson in which he stated that Corson was a great person of highest character, he said, no, I don't remember that. Did I do that? In addition to recommending Corson as a person of highest character, Lindsay also wrote that Corson enjoys an excellent reputation as a good family man, which of course we've already went over. When he was asked about allegations of Corson's drug use, including the cocaine, Lindsay said, "No, actually, I don't know him that well. I don't know him that way." When Michener was asked about Corson's relationship with Lindsay, he said, "I doubt very seriously if he ever really knew Lindsay well." Again, more amnesia. Asked why Corson would contribute so much money to a man he didn't know, Lindsay replied, "Well, I guess he was trying to butter me up, think that I might be able to help him out." There's a lot of interesting points about some of the comments he made. First, Lindsay implies that there might be something wrong with his taking contributions from engineers and contractors. Second, Corson was a real estate developer and thus depended on the commissioner's court for favorable decisions. Lindsay seems to have forgotten that he wrote a letter of recommendation some 9 months earlier that Corson used to buy a savings and loan. In fact, final approval for the purchase came one day after the contributions made to Lindsay. Art Leisner, who was the chief examiner for the Texas Savings and Loan Department at the time Corson got the approval to buy the savings and loan, said he believes Lindsay's letter helped persuade the commissioners. Leisner also said after Corson took over Vision Bank Savings, Leisner's examiners would get veiled threats from Corson's people when they went to Kingsville to check out the savings and loan. They let it be known that they were good friends with Judge Lindsay. Corson's former chauffeur, Tom Studevant, told Houston private investigator P.M. Clinton, who worked for private investigator Clyde Wilson, that Corson claimed to have Lindsay in his back pocket. When Studevant wanted to return to his native Tennessee, Corson threatened him by saying that Judge Lindsay could have him put in jail if he talked about anything Corson had been involved with. Studevant told Clinton, "Lindsay doesn't have the authority to jail anyone, but Studevant may not have known that." In addition to the letter of recommendation from Lindsay, Corson used 6 others in his quest for Vision Bank. One was from Carl Stockholm, president of South Main Bank in Houston, who stated that he had personally known and dealt with Corson for approximately 3 years. Another letter was from Ford Hubbard Jr., who was president of Westside National Bank, where Corson and his mother were the largest stockholders. Hubbard stated it had been my pleasure to be associated with Mr. Robert Corson, both professionally and personally, and that he always handled his financial affairs in professional and timely manners. There was also a letter from S.H. Yeager Jr., VP at General Homes, which stated General Homes Corporation had been doing business with Corson for approximately 2 years in deals of about $70 million to help shepherd his application for the change of ownership in Cleggbird's County Savings through the regulatory process. Corson hired Alvis Vandegrift, the former Texas Savings and Loan Commissioner, the same one who did not object to Herman Beebe's renewed involvement in Texas Savings and Loan after his conviction. So he obviously was a man on the take. Vandegrift had stepped down as commissioner in '83 and became counsel to the law firm Philip King, Smith, and Wright in Houston. The Phillips were Charles Phillips, who controlled First South Savings in Houston, who was also in on the savings and loan failures. The King was Bill King, who controlled Columbia Savings and Caprock Savings, 2 fraud-riddled savings and loan, who also failed. King also owned a title insurance company that he bought with $200 million loan from San Joaquino Savings, brokered by the Mafia man Herman Beebe. Smith and E. Ashley Smith, a Texas state representative. Another member of the firm, David Blunk, said Vandegrift was sought out by many people wanting to enter the savings and loan business. He was their gateway. He's how the CIA and the Mafia got all of the people in the right places. It became known that Carson was a former son in law of Walter Mitchner. I heard him mention the name Walter Mitchner. It came up fairly early in meetings, and he used it often. A federal official said that during an investigation of Vision Blanc's savings, Blanc stated that part of Corson's credibility qualifications was the fact that he was Walter Mitchner's former son in law. Blanc was placed on the board of directors of Vision Blanc and Westside National Bank. During his tenure on the board of both institutions, he was concurrently legal counsel for Albert Belfay, president of Bush's political mentor and Mitchner's friend. After Corson obtained his stock purchase contracts and received state and federal approval, the next order of business was to get his $5.5 million deal. Like every other purchase of the savings and loan, Corson borrowed the money from another financial institution. In this case, Corson turned to a Houston bank that he had done previous land deals, M Bank Houston. On March 7th, 86, the day Houston bought the Cleggburg County savings, he signed a $3.7 million promissory note to M Bank. 1 week later, he signed another one for $2.3 million. Collateral for the notes also included some promissory notes on land Corson had purchased in Houston from General Homes. Corson had sold the property to a partnership including John Riddle. The next year, when the notes were due, Corson was having financial difficulty. And again, M Bank refinanced the loans that weren't being paid, adding another $2 million on top to the guy who couldn't pay the bill originally. They were secured. That loan was secured by Corson's beachfront property in Florida. Federal investigators said that Mitchner Allied Bank took a large participation in that new loan. M Bank was not only used by Corson to finance some of his land deals, it was also the bank for General Homes, which signed a $316 million promissory note to M Bank Houston in 1985. And according to Herman Beebe's former partner, Dale Anderson, Beebe actually used M Bank more often than Allied Bank to finance all of his deals. So it's kind of a mafia bank. Maybe that's what the M stands for. M Bank Houston was a wholly owned affiliate of M Corp, a Dallas-based holding company. N Corp was formed in October 1984 when the merger of Mercantile Bank in Dallas and Bank of Southwest in Houston merged. That was done with Fulbright and Jaworski's law firm. And First City National Bank was involved and connected to Vinson and Elkins. The same month that M Corp was formed, the Bank of Southwest gobbled up Capital National Bank in Houston in the largest bank merger in Texas history. It had been formed in 1965. In 1969, it joined a Swiss bank to start a new Swiss bank called Bank of Investment and Credit, Bern. The chairman of the new Swiss bank, Parva-Vicinini, was head of the Parva-Vicinini Bank, while vice president became L.F. McCollum. And these were all related to investors that were also investors in Boeing, Seagram's, Minute Maid, an affiliate of Coca-Cola, and a London subsidiary of Brown and Root. I'm thinking the M Bank stands for Mafia. There was also Johannesburg investors. So there was another Swiss affiliate that was formed with J. Hughes Ledke, who was Bush's original partner, in Zapata Petroleum. He later went on to be the chairman of Pennzoil. So, definitely mafia. Shortly after the union of these banks, the owner was caught helping Billy Mellon Hitchcock. Who's that? Oh, yeah, that's Mellon Oil Air LSD guy that sold all the LSD to the CIA. Yeah, Billy Mellon Hitchcock and associate of Seymour Lazar, another mafia. So the owner of this bank, Paravicini, was caught hiding and laundering some $67 million of Hitchcock's money, including the CIA LSD money. Paravicini was involved in a fraudulent stock transaction with Hitchcock and eventually was forced to sell Paravicini Bank. After he got in trouble with Hitchcock, Capital National Bank continued on in the Swiss bank. But none of this was ever published in the Houston area. After Corson bought the Clayburgh County Bank with M Bank's money and changed its name to Vision Bank, a new logo was the falcon, the animal and logo choice on many CIA other entities. He really began to live it up. That year, he spent more than $250,000 on automobiles like an Aston Martin. He bought cigarette boats, the kind that drug dealers use. And he bought racehorses because, the mafia gambling thing. He rolled up more than $150,000 of gambling debts in Las Vegas because you got to go do that so they can skim off your money. And he frequented the Dunes Casino, Golden Nuggets, Caesars. He got a call one time from the FBI and decided to stay away from the gambling houses out there. Corson was reportedly paranoid about his security and was always carrying guns. He also had a special Mercedes stretch limo, which he sent to Chicago for armor plating. That's how you know you're dealing with the mafia or the CIA. Once one of his employees was found dead, floating in Corson's backyard swimming pool. Corson and his associates showed up at their office the next day toting guns. Corson told his employees the dead man was a Filipino. Philippines. The Philippines again. Gardner in his 50s, and he just had a heart attack. No big deal. But come to find out, the guy was actually in his 30s and a Jamaican, which, Jamaica? Not that we use that as a drug stop-off point. Oh, yeah, we do. Never mind. During that time, Carson continued to make flights carrying money south of the border. According to law enforcement sources, he had been seen on those records often. And he also had a huge steel walk-in safe installed in his $1 million house in West Houston. The man who installed the safe said he was instructed by Corson to do all his work at night so no one could see him, and to place mirrors in front of it. On one side of the safe was gun racks, and on the other side was drawers, top to bottom, just the right size to hold bearer bonds. Although it was the St. Joe's Paper Company land deal that bankrupted Vision Blanc, there were other debts that helped sink the savings and loan as well. There were government security swaps that allegedly lost more than $3 million. There was a loan to Joe McDermott, Michener's former employee. There was a $7 million loan to a Belgian American investment and trading company. This is called money laundering, to buy land in Dallas. That was in Clint Murchison's Jr.'s bankruptcy. There was loans involving Robert Ferguson, who fronted for Corson in the purchase of the Florida land deal. There were strange stock loans to John Riddle for a Canadian company. Riddle and Ferguson had something else in common. So the next chapter, we're going to explore CIA connections with other savings and loan looters, such as Herman Beebe, the Mafia guy, Mario Renda, the other Mafia guy. Um, the I'm going to give you just a quick tomorrow overview of this fraternity thing. I'm not going to go into it. I'll tell you the names, but basically, there is a fraternity in Texas that we would consider the skull and bones version of the like Warhamster like to say the Yankees and the Cowboys. It'd be the Cowboys version of it if they had one, but it's where the Hunt brothers went. It's a fraternity club that comes up often in the rest of the book, so we'll just do a real quick skim of that. Okay, so that's it. What you got, Bridget? Bridget, is your volume not working again? I don't see your speaker button. Let me take you down and bring you back up. Give Stellar a mic. Who else we got in there? I see Renee.
Thank you. I had gotten a phone call.
There we go.
Avoidable.
All right.
So, yay. Absolutely crazy.
So, yeah. I think the most important takeaway of this chapter is the amount of politicians that are involved in all of these dirty deals. It's not like we don't know that they're all corrupt, but this goes into the detail of just how corrupt they are, with actual evidence to back it up. So it just kind of confirms what we already know and adds a lot of validation to it. It also portrays the corruption in these counties and cities, because every county and city that has had any presence of mafia, like Tampa was Santo Traficana, Miami, Chicago, Kansas City, obvious Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, all of those. All of these things go on every single day, and they still go on today. They don't disappear. That corrupt way of kind of paying people through the back door, through stock vestitures, calling them up and saying, hey, we've got this stock option, you want to get in on it. That type of thing goes on in these larger cities all the time. Go ahead, Bridget.
And okay, we've talked about, we're living in a hologram. This chapter specifically, to me, really showed the illusion of this hologram that we have when we think we're voting in people who are looking out for our best interest, when all they really are, at any cost, it doesn't matter if it's blood on their hands or whatnot, so long as their power, influence, money, anything's for sale. Anything. And it's so relevant today when we have these, it's when they have this war going on against our best interest. Everything is against our best interest. And the people in Congress are not our friends. These are not, they may have been elected, most of them I believe are elected, but these are not out for our best interest. They
No.
will sell us off as slaves as such without a second thought.
Yeah.
And I think this book and especially this chapter really shows that.
Yeah, so you can imagine, obviously, what was not said is this is 1% of the contractors, the engineers, the architects, and the attorneys. The other 99%, like my husband, are out there doing everything the right way. You're never going to get one of those plush contracts because you won't sell your soul. You're not going to get the, multi-million dollar contract on the hospital because you won't sell your soul. You won't make political contributions in exchange for getting a contract. And so, as to Bridget's point, the 99% of the people out there living their life the right way are all effed over by the 1%. And that happens at the city level, it happens at the county level, and it certainly happens at the federal level. And I know you guys probably have seen that rando oil guy on X. He's going through all of the Maine, he's now in Georgia, he went through all the Minnesota, all of the refugee programs that are just stealing billions and billions and billions of dollars. So you're basically paying your taxes for it to be sent to Somalia. That's kind of, I mean, I would not be at all surprised if most of the tax revenue collected every year equals the amount of money going out, and that all of the rest of the government is being financed through the Federal Reserve. So it's just literally crazy. You're so mad. Go ahead.
I don't want to get off topic, but I was wondering if you could kind of help me out and maybe lead me in the right direction. I'm kind of picking up where my uncle left off. He was a manager at the Golden Nugget. He was like a member of the Teamsters, and had a lot of Filipino or the Filipino friends, and he had written some stuff down before he conveniently got his lung blown out by an incubator in 2021. And I'm just wondering if you can point me like where I might be able to find the connection with the Filipino mafia.
So it's really not a Filipino mafia. I would suggest you start off with the book. Hold on a second. It's about Operation Golden Lily. You have to start there. Let me look real quick to get you the actual name. It's out in my studio.
And didn't we cover Golden Lily in the Rumble videos?
Yes.
Okay. Why are you? To give you one of the things, if you would like, I've kind of grouped them all underneath playlists, so you can actually go to that playlist and listen to those, and they should play one after another.
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that. And to give you some sort of background, he used to work for the Air Force. I'm not too sure if he worked for the Air Force or not, but he used to fly C4s into Cambodia and Laos, and he mentioned something about some sort of operation of dropping arms off there. So I'm trying to get more information on that too.
Okay.
But, I mean, it was very vague, very chalky. His notes are really hard to read, unfortunately. Didn't have the best handwriting. So if you guys could help me out with that too, I would appreciate it. Thank you for all that you guys are doing. This is it's been so eye-opening, and you guys are leaving a massive legacy, and I want you all to know that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stellar, go ahead.
Okay, why are you so... Okay, so Golden Nugget, also with what Colonel Towner and Bridget sent you and stuff, look into the past owners of the Golden Nugget. So today, Tillman Fertitta. Prior to him, Steve Wynn. Prior to him, Jackie Gone. Jackie Gahn was also part of the Jewish Mafia that was here, and a whole group of them owned a crap load of casinos out here. So yeah, check into that, the past owners.
And if anyone didn't get a chance to, the Colonel right before the show today was on Redacted. And I think did a brilliant job, and it's really worth watching. I'm going to pin it here in just a second.
Thank you. It was very flattering. They reached out to me this morning and put me in their leadoff segment for their show today. The book is called Gold Warriors, America's Secret Recovery of Yamashita's Gold. It is written by a couple whose last name is Seagraves. It is in our playlist. And it's a lot easier to read or to listen to the book on Rumble, because what I do during it is add all of the Gladio aspects to it. It's a fascinating book. It goes back to World War II and the Japanese collection of precious metal, diamonds, all of the jewels, and primarily gold, and bringing it to the Philippines and burying it in booby trapped caves and underground facilities that they had the POWs dig, and the local Filipinos, they enslaved them, had them dig these things. And then at the end, once the tunnel was done, because they were they were drawing up secret maps as to where they were so they could come back and get all of the treasure. They would dynamite the entrance to it with all of the people still in it. And so the people that eventually, some of the treasure was using the maps, was dug up. They had booby trapped it with cyanide and all kinds of poisonous gas. And a lot of people died when they stumble across one of them because they didn't know they were booby trapped. But a lot of the gold made it into the covert operations and funded a lot of covert activity over the years. Some of it was deposited into banks all around the world. And they've been sitting on this because it's in numbered accounts and not readily available. And we found out a lot of that because of a lawsuit that was eventually filed. And one of the rightful heirs, one of the guys that was going around dropping all the gold deposits in the different accounts, his payment for doing that was 10% of the gold put in his own account. Well, his heir went to redeem, like at Citigroup, one of the accounts, and the next day, Citigroup loaded up that entire account's worth of gold and flew it down to the Caribbean in one of the CIA's front banks. And so all of this gold is running around, not accounted for by anybody, that was retrieved, as well as all of the rest of the jewels and stuff like that. And it went to funding covert operations, in addition to all of the illicit arms and drugs. It's a little known thing that most people have never heard of. And I was fascinated. Warhamster is the one. I'll just tell you this real short story. When Warhamster and I first met, he was fascinated with Operation Gladio. And I obviously was fascinated with his banking experience. And so at the end of the first show, when we were talking off camera, I gave him a homework assignment, which he never did. He gave me a homework assignment, which was reading this book. And I couldn't put the book down. I read it over a long weekend. I literally couldn't put the book down. That's how fascinating, because it ties into Operation Gladio, obviously. And I was just fascinated by the whole book. So what we did, because we had already done probably 6 or 7 months worth of research into Operation Gladio when I first met him. I kind of put in the Gladio aspects of how all of the same players, all of the same Singlib, all of the same players are in that played a role in Southeast Asia. And because it was in the Philippines, I'm fascinated with the Philippines role, as I mentioned on Redacted. The Philippines comes up over and over and over again. And Nichols in the Oklahoma bombing spent time there. Obviously, that's where the shooter's girlfriend was from. The Philippines just show up in weird ways in these stories, almost kind of like a William Pauly guy that showed up in weird ways throughout this whole research project. There's just some people and some places that repeatedly show up. So, okay. If that's all we got, I'm going to jump off here and go grab some dinner. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Let me go over real quick what our.
Why are you? I sent you a DM with the link.
I'm going to go over real quick. Let's see. I do have a podcast tomorrow at 10 a.m. I don't know if it's live. I'll get you some details on that. We have our regular Wednesday at 4 o'clock and the Alpha Warrior Show at 9:30. I don't know whether we're going to be doing the podcast with War Hamster, depending on how he's feeling on Thursday at noon. We'll stand by for that. And I will be doing a podcast at 2 o'clock that day and then our normal 4 o'clock. And I'm going to be on a radio show, the one that was rescheduled from last week to this week on Friday. And that one is not live, but I will tell you when it airs publicly. So, busy schedule this week. And then we're going to be in the holidays. And I don't know what my schedule is going to be. I do have my daughter coming in. But I'm going to try to do as many shows the week of Christmas, at least Monday through Wednesday, and then we'll play it by ear. So that's it in a nutshell. Go ahead, Stellar.
You had an amazing show on Redacted. I was able to catch it. I was reposting it. It was totally freaking amazing.
Awesome.
And totally amazing. And there's more to this Rob Reiner thing than what meets the eye as well. There was another Grammy star who was murdered by his 30-some-odd-year-old child, stabbed to death. So there's something more going on. So I thank you for having Operation Gladio classes for the last several years. Thank you so much, because
Thanks.
I would be so confused. Amazing. Everybody needs to watch the Redacted with Colonel Towner.
So, you know what's interesting? You've noticed a trend with President Trump. President Trump is very caring when someone dies, unless they're an evil person. So I agree with you, Stellar. There's a lot more that's going to come out about Rob Reiner. He treated the death of John McCain exactly the same way. And for people who aren't paying attention, they're not going to see the correlation. We all see it. And that's definitely a blessing of the information that we've been able to share with each other. Go ahead, Renee.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Because I'm in a zone that doesn't have good reception, but congratulations. It was an amazing Redacted show, and I'm just we are all so proud of you. And yeah, it's fabulous that they choose you for the source now. It's super exciting, and just congratulations.
I could not do it. Renee, for those of you who don't know, Renee does a lot of research behind the scenes and sends me information. as do many of you guys. I would not be where I am without you guys. I view everything that we do as a team effort, and I thank my lucky stars that we were, and I do believe it's God's intervention that we're all here to collectively together. But I know I say this, but I truly mean it. I could not do it without all of you. And thank you for the work that you do behind the scenes, Renee.
Always a pleasure to be part of this team. And regarding this chapter, I keep getting the feeling that the Adelsons are gonna somehow. In the first chapter of this book, there was a connection that the Adelson name connected to a guy in the La Costa in California.
Yeah.
And
Merv Adelson.
And then recently, with what's going on with Israel and Australia, blah blah blah, that whole.
So, for those of you who don't know,
the publication. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. You went out for just a second.
Yeah, sorry. The publication that Ghost of Base Patrick Henry put out is an Adelson publication in Israel, FYI.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be an Adelson on deck, I think, is coming up. Anyway, just saying. That's all. All right. Bye, y'all. Congratulations again. I'm going to let you speak. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Renee. For those of you who don't know, that was one of kind of the surprises. There's been so many in this research. I was unaware of the significantly large Jewish mafia presence in Australia. And I do mean it's large. There's when we were talking about BCCI, the CIA front, or not, I'm sorry, Nugent Hand, the CIA front bank, there's so many in Australia. Part of that story had to do with Australia was picked as what's referred to as an R&R location, rest and relaxation for when you're at war for Vietnam participants. So the military had contracted a hotel in Australia. And I'm not sure if it was Sydney, but it was one of the major cities there. And I'm pretty sure it was Sydney. And the Murdochs were there at the time, as in the Fox News Murdochs. And there was a huge mafia presence there. So this hotel had a guy that they had got out of the military, a lieutenant colonel, and kind of set up in business there to get the contract for the CIA, was behind this whole thing, for the servicemen to come and do R&R there. They had the hotel right next to a whorehouse and a restaurant that was bugged by the mafia and the CIA. And so it plays right into this book. The corollary was that a lot of the information, the blackmail piece of this, was all of the rooms in the hotel were also bugged. And so any of these, and many of them did become, 1-star, 3-star, 4-star generals over time. And they had blackmail material on them, because what are you going to do when you're a single guy in a war zone and you get 2 weeks of vacation in the middle of a year deployment to Vietnam? When you go to Australia, you're going to go crazy. You're going to get drunk. You're going to do stupid shit. And that was all part and parcel of this. And maybe this is completely subjecture, blackmailable at some point in the future to something that you did when you may have been a lieutenant or a captain participating in the Vietnam War. And so I was shocked. And then, of course, you have Pine Gap, which in the early 60s, I think it went operational in 62, which the CIA and the US government sold to the Australian government that it was a military location, when in fact it was never a military location. It was a CIA location, which came out later. Um, and it's used for the Southern Hemisphere's uh, surveillance program. And of course, because of Five Eyes, all of the um, government in Australia had access to information even on their own citizens. And I'm not going to remember his name, but the one prime minister that was elected on the platform to shut Pine Gap down was cooed by both MI6 and the CIA. He was set up in a financial thing. His financial officer, like what we would call the Secretary of Treasury, resigns because he got set up, and then it took down the entire government. And so there's lots of history that's associated with this whole thing that most people are completely not aware of. But there is a huge Jewish mafia presence in Australia, which I find very interesting in light of what just happened. So just put that in the back of your head, too. All right. 6 o'clock. We're going to call it a day. Thanks, you guys, for being here. And thanks for the kind words. And thank you all for being on this journey with me. All right. Take care. I will see you tomorrow. See ya.